I'm here to say, you can do it. You can do this. You too can have the small town queer experience.
That should just be like the video in itself, you know?
What's your story? What's your sign? It's like we're twin flames in a different life.
Welcome to the Queer in Alberta TikTok series, Potentially podcast. We are figuring it all out one day at a time. My name is Kelsey. I'm a queer woman living in Lethbridge, Alberta. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm Filipina Canadian.
Thanks for having me, Kelsey. I am Alix. I live in small town Stettler. Nice. And I came across your TikTok because the algorithm just knows me. They're like, you're from Alberta and you're queer. Here's some information for you. It was really For You page when you showed up.
I do that all the time, and it makes me so flippin' happy every single time. I'm super excited to talk to you because, like you mentioned, you want to touch on small town experiences of queerness. It's already one conversation to talk about queerness in Alberta, but I feel like that's one of the most like niche things to talk about.
Yeah, in like a small town. And it's been a bit of a journey for me. I don't know. We'll get into it. But I was telling Kelsey that I also run a podcast called Small Town, Not Small Minds. Just a plug there for everyone. We have like similar interests in our endeavors here. Like it's about connection for me and finding other like-minded people in small town areas.
I think this is going to be like personally a really interesting conversation for me to have with you because like I grew up in the small town, but I left, and I always kind of credit that as this really big like awakening and freedom thing with my queerness. Whereas were you always from a small town?
Always from a small town, discovered my queerness in a small town. Like it's been my roots the whole time.
And you love it. You love it, you said.
Yeah, I like there's just something about like the pace of life. I love the community aspect. And I grew up on an acreage too, so I really like animals outside the nature and just being in that all the time. There
are definitely aspects of small town life that I can enjoy, but definitely like small city girl these days. I like having things to do. And like I remember where I grew up, Bonnyville, like they got a McDonald's after I graduated, and it was like cultural reset, you know?
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, when we got Tim Hortons growing up, we were the biggest news. Like
totally. Yeah. Like we drive to the town over to go to Boston Pizzas, and it's so fun to just like have this kind of conversation with somebody that gets it. Because I feel like living in the, even Lethbridge is a smaller city. Most people are from Calgary if they're here for school, so like this is a total foreign ball game for them.
I agree. It is very funny. Well, a lot of the queer people I do meet are from like bigger centers. Yeah. So if they come out to Stettler, it's a huge shock for them. I get two different responses. I'll hear like, this is in the middle of nowhere, or I'll hear things like, oh, you have a Walmart? Okay. Like they're like, it's okay here. It's like we're pretty big. 2 McDonald's even, so.
Oh wow, you too? Bonnyville could never. I am not here to just throw shade on my account, but I think this is going to be a great conversation for maybe dispelling some stereotypes about queerness in small towns, so I'm excited to get into it. And I guess to start, would you mind maybe sharing some of your coming out story with me?
Yeah, I feel like in a way, like I'm still in the process of like learning who I am. I grew up in Wainwright. And no like questioning of sexuality then, but I had like a group of friends, like none of us were really dating. We just all like we were band kids and in robotics and like so we like
unique.
Yeah, I don't know. So we just had like fun, and like romance and dating was not really on the table. It wasn't until I came to Stettler for my teaching job that I had honestly my first like romantic experience with a woman, and I was like, oh, all of those things before that I called a girl crush was just like me actually having like a crush on them. So and that was like around the age of 22. But then the next like 4 years, I was like very scared to say anything. Being a teacher in this town, like you go anywhere and you see people you know. Like my reputation precedes me. I was nervous to be open. So many things I didn't know. Like, so I identify as bisexual. So part of it was like, do I do the hassle of like coming out if I'm not seeing a woman? Because what if like then people don't want their kids in my class? Or like I had those kind of worries where I'm like, do I even like go through the hassle was sort of the thought process if I'm not seeing a woman. It wasn't until I got onto TikTok like 2 years ago that I started seeing people like myself, like represented and hearing their stories. And I was like, this is really important for kids to see me being me and open. Students are my whole life. Not my whole life. I have work-life balance, let's be clear. Yeah, I do. But they are a big part of who I am. And I want to be able to show them, like, it's okay to be you. That's where I am now. And then I kind of went like real hard right out of the gate there when I was like, I'm ready for everyone to know. I made a video and sent it to my staff and was like, hey,
get it,
come out on email. Then I started the GSA in our elementary school. And so just started living large with it. And I've been so happy since being open with myself and others.
I love that for you. I don't know if I just got on bisexual TikTok or something, but nearly everybody that I interviewed in the last week was like, I'm bisexual and this is my experience. And I'm like, you know what? Go bi besties. I'm here for it. Cool. But when you mention the hassle of coming out, I think that's something that almost every bisexual person I interviewed kind of touched on. If it's, say, a girl coming out as bisexual, that their parents or friends are like, well, I don't get it. If you like men as well, why don't you just pick men?
Wouldn't it just be easier if you married a man? And I'm like, I'm out here trying to marry anybody who wants to be with me. What is easy about dating?
I think everybody in the community is kind of aware of that biphobia is a thing that you guys face overall, from straight people, but also within the community itself, which is really sad. Just talking to so many bi people has just really driven it home that how much of a current problem it still is.
And I think too, for me, my experience with the friends that I have, we're all really open and have these conversations all the time. And then when you leave the close-knitness of your friends, and sometimes you're like, oh right, not everybody thinks this way.
That even makes me think of when you talked about before coming out, how you were a little worried about parents not wanting kids in your classes and stuff if they knew that you were bi. When I first came out, I was worried about my cousins, my younger cousins in my family, if their parents wouldn't want me to spend time with them anymore.
Isn't it interesting, the thoughts that come up, and they are very real too. They're very real things that you consider.
You say how your kids are your life, and I wonder if maybe those thoughts that you have, you really want to make sure that your kids never have in regards to if someone's not going to accept them for who they are.
Yes. And I will say, so I teach grade 1, so they're 6 and 7 years old. Oh, they're so little. They are germy and wild, and I love them. Yeah. But they are so open-minded. I should have came out to them first, because they are go best friend and are no qualms anyway.
And isn't that inspiring to see? Because I'm only 25. It wasn't that long ago I was in high school. And I feel yes, there's a difference between high school kids and grade 1s. But what I'm trying to get at is I think attitudes have changed so much, even in the last 10 years.
Absolutely. Even just in the conversations that happen in my classroom, obviously, parents are talking to their kids too, because I don't have to do a lot of teaching. I just do prompting with questions. I had one girl, she stood up and addressed the class after one of the books, and she's like, just so you know, boys can marry boys, girls can marry girls, and sometimes you can be born a girl and you decide to be a boy.
And this is Stettler.
This is in Stettler from a 6-year-old.
But do you find that coming out specifically in Alberta and in a small town was challenging, or are you surprised by anything about it?
I was surprised at how much I actually needed to come out. That surprised me the most, honestly, because I felt really comfortable knowing who I was, and I was okay with my close friends and family knowing those things about me. And I thought, well, it's not anyone else's business. But honestly, coming out to my staff and being open with my students, and even broaching the subject with my grandparents and that kind of stuff, honestly opened. I feel I came into a second coming of coming of age. I didn't think I needed that, but I clearly did. And then in regards to being in a small town with that, I have a really good basis of friends here. My family's very supportive, and my staff they love me. I've been here for a long time though too. I've had very good connections with all of these people. So I think coming out was like not difficult for them to hear or receive. They just wanted to like support. But I definitely hear a lot of those just kind of little comments that, like I say, like how they don't intend them as hurtful, but they just kind of come out.
It's like an ignorance thing, right? Because I think it's not the intention to be harmful or anything, but it's just such a lack of awareness and sensitivity.
And that was one thing I wanted to talk about because I did start running the Gay Straight Alliance. And what I noticed through that was a lot of the staff at my school, I'd say all of the staff want to be able to support like the LGBTQ plus youth. Everybody is too scared and doesn't know where to start. Like there's not education, background knowledge, and no one knows what to do. And it feels like the second a student is questioning or says something that is like, it's like panic. They come to me and panic, like, what do I do? I don't want to say the wrong thing. There's just no education or professional development for the staff, and that's very stressful for them.
It immediately makes me think of a connection point where it's not the exact same, but like in my experiences as a mixed person of color, it's almost similar to like the conversations that have come up in the last 2 years surrounding race. People, particularly like my white friends and allies, wanting to educate themselves and do better, and then all of this learning and trying to find the resources to do that learning. It's a whole thing.
Teachers love their students and like often always have their best interests at heart. It's not just learning for yourself, it's learning to like make sure that they're okay too. In like these small towns, there's not a lot of role models, there's not a lot of resources.
And then it puts it all on you to be that one person because you're the one visible.
Via the email video that I sent everyone.
Honestly, I would kind of be interested to see it. I think it sounds iconic, like well done.
I checked with admin first. I was like, can I send this video out to everyone? I feel like it's not a huge push in education right now. We're just on the cusp of it where like it's going to be the next thing. But there is this nonprofit organization out of Edmonton called AltView.
Okay.
And they have helped me a ton. They helped me with the startup of the GSA, with like broaching the subject with parents that were concerned, broaching the subject with other staff members that were concerned. But again, that connection came through just like knowing other queer people and me being like, what do I do? Because I can't be the sole educator of Stettler. You know? No, because my experience is my experience also. Like I'm only one voice.
And that's so important to remember. I think like in general, minorities across the board kind of get shuffled into this like one size fits all. And that's not the case at all. Like we are all intricate and diverse and have our own opinions and might not always necessarily agree.
Again, that was an unexpected part of coming out, was then I was like put in that position. Whereas before, when I was just like quietly out, like soft launch of my sexuality was like, I wasn't experiencing all this because it was just like my close friends and family.
It's both a positive thing and a stressful thing sometimes because you want to be that source of familiarity and education and create a safe space, but it is a lot of like emotional labor on a person, at least from my experience.
And sometimes I'm like, yeah, I'm open and great and let's talk. And other times I'm like, it's not the time.
Oh, not the time, not the question. Maybe never the question.
Also that. Yeah.
You talked about parents a little bit and having those conversations. Did it go well?
It was, for me and the students that were part of it, we started last year.
Right.
Like last academic year. It was amazing. The kids that were in it, like for example, one of the students always had their hood up, like couldn't barely see their eyes, like very sulking. And every time they're in GSA, hood is off and they're smiling. You could physically see it. The unfortunate part is that there was not necessarily enough support from the community and the school for us to do it another year. So this year it's not happening. I know in the future it will. You do a professional growth plan every year as a teacher, like what do I want to grow in? So this year my goal was to like gather all the resources I needed, connect with other teachers, so that when it can make like a second comeback, I have a lot more. I did a lesson on pronouns with one of the classes because there was a student who wanted to come out as they, them. And kids were so receptive and loved it. But then parents were less receptive. Not overall. Some parents are like, this is cool. But it's hard when parents get involved and then things kind of get shut down. People think you're just too young in elementary school. and I disagree with that. So
I would also fundamentally disagree with you. You hear the conversation about like, how do you know that you like girls if you're a girl and et cetera, and you're so young? And it's like, well, how did you know that you liked boys? You just did. Could you maybe tease that piece that you mentioned about scary, like explaining what you mean by that a little more?
I think like fear of the unknown is a big thing. There's not even a lot of like media, like mainstream media for like straight people to be seeing queer people. It's not like it's something they see or know often, and then they have their own stereotypes or prejudices or feelings, whatever. And so they're basing it on that instead of being like, oh, Miss McDonald, she's a great teacher. Oh, she also happens to be queer. Do you know what I mean? Person first, like I wouldn't say anything about my sexuality until like I had a signed contract, just for my own fears.
I hate that for you. I actually wrote down as you were speaking, and then you said exactly what I wrote down. Like, I feel like that scary piece really comes from, like you said, attaching stereotypes and projections of what you think queerness is onto somebody in real life because you just haven't seen it before.
I know I actually had my friend on the podcast to talk about queer superpowers was an episode we did, because I feel like a lot of the time we do focus, or not focus, but like the queer experience feels like you just hear the tragedy part. We were like, let's just talk about everything that's awesome about being queer. And that was very fun. And I feel like for the most part, my experience was like queer superpower, like really, really well received. There's been setbacks, but people that I need love me and support me.
The adversity that queer people go through, it's not fair, and oftentimes it can be very painful, but it makes us super strong. Even like, you know, your GSA not happening this year, like I hear that you're gathering resources to hit the ground running and just make it the most like impactful and successful thing that it can be when it's the right time. And that just shows your own strength.
We all have superpowers, I'm telling you.
Because coming from a small town, like in my experience, I didn't have any representation of queerness when I was growing up. It wasn't even like something that I thought was real. Where did you maybe find some representation yourself when you were younger and maybe coming to terms with your own identity?
I feel like I didn't really have representation growing up. I didn't even really know what bisexuality was until I was in my 20s. People that were close to me even like would say like, oh, that's like a phase or it's not real. So then it was hard to like claim that because it was like, oh, I already know these like preconceived notions. So no, I feel like it honestly wasn't until TikTok that I started seeing representation.
That seems to be like a common thread of experience that's happened for a lot of young queer women. Like I can't even count the amount of videos I've seen on TikTok that are like me when I was thinking I was straight and then I downloaded this clock app and now 2 years later I'm bi.
And like even when I'm thinking movies or TV shows, I don't even see necessarily like the bisexual experience, let alone the queer experience, being like the main storyline.
But I had a conversation with Cece, trans woman in Calgary, and she was talking about that, like trans representation outside of the bounds of tragedy. Sometimes queer people shouldn't just have to come out and they can just be accepted and just be gay.
Like Schitt's Creek. I feel like how they handled sexuality was just so like
so
loved it.
Good. Honestly, iconic Canadian film and television right there. I would die for Dan Levy.
I think we all would.
He's like the Prince of Canada at this point. Like, to be perfectly honest. Like, if you would ever for some reason see this, just know that these two girls in Alberta are literally your biggest fans.
Yes, honestly. Not even just us two. Like I think every like queer person in Canada.
When we talk about education and making things like accessible and breaking down stereotypes, his character does such an amazing job of that. Like David is representation of just like a queer person in a small town.
100%. I love that representation and I wish that was it, like more. I wish he was in everything.
What is it like staying in a small town as a queer person?
I don't want to like make people think it's the worst because it's not. The one thing that I think is hard is honestly dating. I feel established here. I feel comfortable like standing up for myself or for students that are queer. And I feel like that's important and I get a lot of value from that. Outside of that, it is hard to have like other queer relationships, like in terms of like friendships or romantic relationships, because like that community is not here. most of my queer friends are in Calgary or Edmonton. And then I find the dating is like so hard because anytime I meet someone, they're not from here. I'm always at like setting my stuff at like max distance. And then they're like, you live very far away. I just feel like the beat of my life is just in small communities.
Is this kind of association of queerness with being centralized in urban environments? People think there's this idea that you can only be queer in Canada if you're in like Toronto or Vancouver, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's so important to share that, no, just because you're queer doesn't mean you love big city life. And there are still things that you can enjoy about, small town existence.
One of the biggest factors is there's just like not the exposure and like the personal piece to it too. Because like as soon as you like know me and you're connected to me, then you're like, well, I don't want to harm her. So here's like the ways that I can be respectful. Like when there's that, like when it's personal, I think then you start doing the work yourself because then you're connected to it.
Making queerness human, making it personal, right? Like it takes it from this like obtuse caricature that you see in media or you have from like ancient archaic ideas of what a gay person looks like. And it makes it, this is my kid's grade 1 teacher who's super cool and has a great septum piercing.
If you're not getting like the feedback or the validation that you want from outside of you, like I think, and it's hard to just find that power within because you're not always going to come across people that accept you or love you or understand you. I just want everyone to know that they are valid in who they are and like let yourself like know that. Just try your best to like have your own back because that's all you have sometimes is yourself.
There's one question left. If you could go back in time and tell something to your younger self, what would it be?
I do love this question, and I think my answer is going to I know my answer is going to be totally different train of thought, but while also coming into my own sexuality in my 20s, I discovered that I have chronic depression. And so for about 10 years in my life, that was undiagnosed, and I was doing things like therapy,
right,
and trying to take care of my mental health. But not knowing all of those things were not going to work until I balanced out the serotonin in my brain. And so being on meds for 2 years has changed my life. And I wish I could go back and tell myself at 16, you have a hormone imbalance in your brain and you just need medicine to regulate that and you will be fine. And that would have saved me a lot of years of hardship. That's been my main struggle. If I was on meds younger, I think I wouldn't be having my second coming of age story right before I'm 30, but it also brought me here. So
thank you for the vulnerability and sharing that with me. I don't want to speak out of turn, but quite often I hear from queer people similarly, they're upset that they wasted so much time or lost so much time to whether it was mental health or not knowing their sexuality, and they're very frustrated. And I understand that, but at the same time, I've also interviewed people that didn't come out until they were in their 40s or 50s, right? So even though we did lose those times and we had second puberty or second coming out, as they say, whatever it is, a little later in life, you still are able to hit the ground running and have so much potential in front of you. And yeah, I feel so impressed and in awe of your story, honestly. Thank you for sharing that with me.
Yeah, no, thank you for hearing it as well. I don't have regrets with how I've lived my life. Like I say, I brought myself to here and I'm really happy with where here is. And that's another thing I think is important to speak to is mental health, and definitely talk about that a lot too, but I'm a huge sharer, so.
It makes sense that a lot of queer people face, times with mental health. If we're spending so much time not understanding what we're feeling or not feeling like we are seen or have a place in the world that we inhabit. So there are definitely conversations that happen in tandem, and they're both exceedingly important.
Absolutely. Yes, that's the one thing I notice is the more queer people I get connected with, it's not only just like their queer story, but like I go to therapy, I'm on these meds, I'm da-da-da, you know what I mean? And I'm like, oh my gosh, are we the same people?
Is there anything else that you were really wanting to touch on in our time together?
No, I think we covered a ton of bases.
And we are yassifying small towns. That's what we're
We
doing.
are. Yes. Come to Stettler. I'll show you around.
Oh my God. Okay. Honestly, have I ever thought vacation in Stettler? No. But am I going to maybe consider it now? Yes.
Yes. Okay. Steps in the right direction. Maybe considering.
Oh my God, you're gonna like make me go full on into like my origin story by dragging me to a small town again. What do you do for fun in Stettler?
You have to make your own fun. It's not like you can go to things necessarily.
Right.
But we have a lake here. I kayak all the time. There's things to do, but there's not things to do if you're alone. I feel like it would be hard to be here and not have friends or family.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But it's so funny that you mentioned that there's a lake that made me think of like the lake in Bonnieville. It's like small towns and their lakes.
Right? It's you go to BP's and you go to the lake. Those are the things to do.
This is too much. This is hilarious. Wow. But
I know.
You're thriving. You love kayaking on your lake. It's good.
I do. I was at Boston Pizza last night. I love kayaking on the lake.
Okay, what is with like BPs just being like the cornerstone of small town experience?
I don't know, because I had told my friend we had like not connected for a lot of years outside of high school, and then he was like, what kind of things do you do in Stettler, you know? And I was like, well, I'm still going to BP's. And he was like, that kind of hurts my heart a little. I was like, mine too, but
well, you know what? Yeah, we will vacation in Stettler and we will see what it has to offer. It will be fun. Stettler's not too far from Edmonton, hey?
No, we're 2 hours.
Okay, yeah, but like in small town speak, that's nothing.
Like, yeah, for me, that like as soon as it's over 3 hours, then it's far.
Yeah. Little closing of the video as we've totally got sidetracked. Just
Sorry.
No, it's like the trials and tribulations of small town life, and it's so.
Oh Lord.
Thank you so much for being on here with me today. You can go follow Alix at Alix Brett on TikTok. Here's to yassifying the Alberta school curriculum.
Yes, and the small town experience. Thanks for having me, Kelsey.
Of course. Best line of the interview. You too can have the small town queer experience.
You can.